How does one get a job where they're working for their boss on a sailboat, cruising through the Keys?
Well, you've got to be a total badass.
You have created a very unique lifestyle that is very different than any...
Once again, so unique, I don't fit in anywhere.
No, exactly.
We're not just trying to make something that solves a problem. We want it to solve a problem and be good at it, right?
Wait, did you just say form over function?
Yeah.
Shouldn't it be the other way around?
No.
Shouldn't functionality rule over form?
No.
What do you wish there was more of in the world, Ray? Tell me when you're ready to roll, Jesse. We're good to go when you are. We're rolling?
Yeah.
All right, Ray. We're rolling. You ready for this? Welcome, brother.
I'm happy to be here.
Good to hang out with you.
Yeah, I miss you.
Ray, if we're going to try to be professional on this podcast and like actually achieve a few things, most importantly,
as professional as I can be,
talk about your business, which has done some amazing things, been on Good Morning America, Shark Tank. But before we do that, how's your summer been?
Hot. Very hot. We went sailing for the last 2.5 months. So we got to see it go from a beautiful springtime weather to Florida summer.
Where were you sailing?
We did the Keys. So we went from Stewart down to Key West, out to Marquez's Key, which is like the last island you get to before you get to Dry Tortugas, which is the last island you'll get to before you get to nothing. And then we kind of just island hopped our way back.
I saw this amazing drone. Do you have a drone?
Yeah, I have a drone.
I saw this amazing drone shot that you took of your boat on a reaf out there.
It wasn't on the reef, thankfully. It was near the reef.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yes. Yeah.
That would not be a good thing.
No.
What were you? What's a highlight from your trip sailing? What would you say was your favorite part?
I got a business highlight. We got to take 2 of our engineers with us when we left from Stewart, and they stayed on board for a week all the way down to Key West. And it was the coolest thing ever, because I thought they were going to want to stay for like a day or so and then be like, all right, I'm done. But they didn't. They hung out, and they got a chance to sail in all different types of weather and learn about anchoring, different anchorages, and all the getting groceries with a dinghy, all the fun stuff you get to do as a cruiser. They got to learn. So
this was a business associate, you said?
Yeah, it was 2 of our employees, the 2 engineers that worked directly under me, came with us, and we worked remotely for a week. We had a little break where we didn't have to build anything. It was all, where we were just doing design work. So we just all worked together on the boat during the day. And
how does one get a job where they're working for their boss on a sailboat, cruising through the Keys?
Well, you've got to be a total badass to get there. And you got to be dedicated, because I obviously wouldn't take anybody who's not all in on the company, for sure.
Tell me a little bit, since we're here for business, but we're here for pleasure. We're here to kind of talk about you and your lifestyle and where you grew up. But since we're on the topic, tell me a little bit about, I teased up a little of some of your highlights, but tell me a little bit about your company, what you do, and who you are, and where you're located.
So we're a product development company, and essentially what that means is we help businesses, entrepreneurs, inventors, startups, basically take their ideas and turn them into actual physical products. So pretty much everything you see on the shelves at Walmart and stuff like that, they're all designed by somebody, whether that's the mother company or the mother company goes out and they contract someone else out to design it. Somewhere along the line, someone had to come up with how that's going to be put together, how it's going to work, and how to actually make it. And that's kind of what we do. So we'll take ideas, or a lot of times it's just problems. So a lot of inventors, most of their inventions are problems. They'll be like, well, I have an idea to solve this problem, and we'll help them actually solve the problem.
It's funny when you think about it. Most people take for granted like all the little things, simple things like water bottles, or way something fits in their hand, like an iPhone or a different product. They take for granted all the thought that went into making that useful, and that's kind of what your whole job is, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into making it useful, but I think the amazing thing about the time we live in now is that things that people have in their lives aren't just useful, right? They're way better than that. So we're not just trying to make something that solves a problem. We want it to solve a problem and be good at it, right? So when you're looking at just any sort of consumer product, it would be very simple to just make something that solves the problem, like a spatula even, right? Like you have a spatula, it's designed to flip a hamburger over. But if you go to the store, you look, there's 10 different versions. They're all different shapes. They all have different handle shapes. And all those little changes were done through design to try and make a better product. So not just something that's useful, but something that actually is meaningful to the customer. And, 100 years ago, people weren't having, maybe 150 years ago, maybe, when people had something that was useful, that was it. It was had a use, and they used it for that use. And maybe it made their life a little easier. But now it's like every single thing we have in our life is tailored to a consumer's desires, right? Before you had a horse and buggy, there was a carriage being pulled by a horse. It was a box so you could put stuff in it and get pulled along by a horse. Now we have cars in every single shape and flavor you could imagine, all basically tailored to what they think the consumer wants. So there's a lot of design work that goes into all of that, and it goes from everything from cars down to pencils. There's someone or a group of someone's looking at how to make that product better.
Why? What kind of, take me back a little bit. How did you get into this industry, and why did you kind of choose this particular kind of, well, it's the same field. It's kind of two questions in the same. But how did you get to this point in your career?
So a lot of it comes down to my two biggest influences as a child, which was, everyone's going to say this, one was my dad and the other one was my grandmother. So my dad was like a facilities manager and a mechanic. He was like a jack of all trades. The guy could fix anything, just do anything, right? So I, as being his little boy, I'd follow him around and learn a bunch from him. So growing up, I was always the kid that all the other kids would come to when they wanted to figure something out. Even like friends' parents would let me work on their stuff to fix it because I was just around fixing stuff so much. I just had a really good knowledge of how things worked. So that kind of sparked my interest in the mechanical engineering side of things that we do, right? On the other side, my grandmother, in her retirement, she took up painting. So when I was a kid seeing her, she was always painting all this stuff, right? So I started getting like a big exposure to art. So she would take me to art museums. She would, tell me what she's doing when she's painting and all this stuff. And I didn't know it as a kid that she wasn't like some professional painter. As a child, I saw my grandmother doing all this stuff. I thought that was her career. But I learned later on that it was a hobby she had. But it had a huge influence on me. So once I got later in life, I was doing engineering. But I always had this like taste for art and making things look nice. So I try to employ that more into my engineering work. And I kind of just blended industrial design and mechanical engineering together. And I started doing that, as a moonlighter and then a consultant. And now we have a firm and so forth. And it's what I am passionate about. Like, I'm usually not the actual product itself. I might not be that excited about, but I'm excited about making it look as good as it can and work as good as it can, and combining those two things together is what makes good products.
So do you go through life looking at everything that you pick up and work with and go, oh, they really screwed up on this piece. Oh, they should have done that.
9 times out of 10 I'll pick up stuff and I'll be like, God, how'd they come up with that idea? That's way better than what I would have done. No, it's definitely I do critique stuff a lot, and because doing that, you make your own designs better. If you see things people did, you can look at things they did that work really well, and you're like, that's a great idea. And you can see things they did that didn't work really well, and you can come up with a better method to solve it. So if you're ever designing a product similar to that or whatever, you have kind of a knowledge. And it doesn't even need to be similar. Sometimes it can be a completely different thing, and you use the same ideas for it.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Palm Bay, Florida.
How was life growing up in Palm Bay, Florida?
It was fun. So we lived like in the western part of Palm Bay. So there was like when I grew up, we had like one other house on the street. And the downside was there wasn't like a ton of kids in the neighborhood, and my mom didn't like the schools that were where we were at. So like we used like freedom of choice. I went to another school that was over by where my dad worked. So I had a few friends that lived by us, but other than that, like none of my friends were nearby. So I spent a lot of time just playing around in the woods with the few kids that were there. But it was cool because we had a bunch of woods, right? So we would just go out in the morning and we'd build forts and all the stuff that kids dream about doing. We got to do it, and we just had tons of space, a lot of space to roam, which it was funny because growing up, I'd go fishing with my dad or whatever, and we'd catch fish and we'd clean them, and then we'd take the guts and we'd just walk across the street into the woods and toss them in the woods. And then, I got my first house. We were in like a neighborhood with a house on all sides, and I went fishing. We come back and I clean these fish, and I'm like, the hell do I do with all these scraps? I'm like, I don't want to throw them in my garbage can and have it stink.
I have the same problem.
Yeah, because you're a big fisherman, I hear.
No, not a good big fisherman.
You have the guts of other things you
I
gotta
have
hide?
things that I'm trying to dispose of all the time.
So the guy that was fishing with me, he was like, oh, so what I always do is I just put them in a garbage bag, stick them in the freezer, and then throw them out on garbage day. I was like, okay. So I take these bag of fish guts and I put them in the garage freezer, and then they were there for like 5 years. So, yeah.
I say I have the same problem. I grew up in the country, so I understand kind of the country. Making the train.
Mine was wannabe country. It was a neighborhood that just had no houses.
Oh, okay. Oh, it sounds like you.
It was all roads. They weren't paved.
I grew up in the country, and I never really have done well adjusting to suburbia. That's what the point I was trying
I
to
just
get at.
haven't done well adjusting to literally anything.
No,
okay?
I believe that.
I am of a group that does not fit
Why
in.
is that? Wait, you're technically an engineer? Is that right? Is that accurate or no?
Yes, I do have a degree in that.
So you're technically an engineer. Engineers are notorious for having poor social skills. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna. It's kind of true.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think that is? Why? What is the deal with the social skills?
I
of
don't know
engineers?
because I'm not that type of engineer. So
that's not true.
no,
That
I don't
is
have
not true, Ray.
I have good social skills.
You do. You're pretty good.
My problem is I never quite fit into a clique.
Okay. Why? Why is that?
I don't know. I'm weird.
Now, come on. There's more to it. Why? Why do you not feel comfortable? Do you want to maintain distance? And
No, I think a lot of it though is because I had mentioned like I went to schools that were not like I went to a couple different schools as a kid, so like I constantly was making new friends and then going to another school and making new friends. So I'm very good at like making new friends, and I have friends that I've had forever, but like when there's cliques and groups, I do very poorly at breaking into those. Like, so I never feel like I fit into a group. And usually when I have a group that's my own, we're like small and not, I don't know. We don't fit in with the big.
Well,
big
you know, I mean, we're a little off topic, but I like this
we
type
typically
of
go off topic.
No, but I think it's good, and I think it'll come full circle because I think it relates to the fact that you're an artist at some level, and what you do is both engineering and art. But on the topic of clicks, and you have created a very unique lifestyle that is very different than any.
Once again, so unique, I don't fit in anywhere.
No, exactly. That's very different than any of the norms. I mean, you live on a sailboat.
A lot of people do, though.
No, but yes and no. I mean, I lived on a sailboat in the Marina del Rey, so I can relate. I lived on it for a year and a half, 18 months. It was much smaller than yours, 27-foot Catalina. Mm-hmm. You lived on like a 40. What do you?
45 feet.
45 feet. So that's a much bigger space. But I lived on a sailboat. And it's a little bit isolating at some level. And mind you, I know a lot of people do, but not a lot of people do that own a business, try to have a family, and try to maintain the norms of the day-to-day, that the rat race that we're all in.
Yeah, a lot of the people we run into are either retired, or if they do have a family and kids, like one of them just works remotely from the boat. And they're all there's a couple different groups. They either just live in a marina forever, or they check out and they go sailing and they're working remotely, or they're living off savings or something like that. Whereas we're kind of like a blend of all of those. Like we take off and we go for a while as long as we can. But But ultimately, we end up having to get stuck back because we have to go into the office for a little bit. Yeah, and I don't know. We're typically when we meet people, we don't fit in with them.
The bigger question: why? Why do you choose this life? You choose this. This is a choice.
Oh, I don't know. I get bored sitting around a house. Like so when we had a house, we never stayed there. Like we would sleep there, but like we would be gone all weekend. We'd be like we'd come home from work. We'd probably go out to eat or something like that. Like we were never at the house. So we had this huge, big, expensive house. We never used it, and it's weird because when we have the boat, we travel on it, but we spend more time on it than we ever did in the house. Probably just because it's more fun. It's like an adventure.
I love it.
It sounds cool when you tell it to people too. Be like, oh yeah, I live on a yacht.
Yacht.
Yeah.
You call it a yacht?
Yeah, it's a yacht. That's how
What's
it's spelled. Y-A-C-H.
Oh, a yacht.
Yeah.
I like that. See, that's
Yacht.
I like that. And then when you're not on the boat, you also traverse. I know when I first met you, when we first started working together, you were traversing to the, and maybe you still do, the northeastern coast of the States for some of your clients via camper.
Yeah, so we did a camper thing for a little while. It was fun. We built up basically a product development lab in the back of a little toy hauler. So that way I could still work. And we had a customer up in Rhode Island. We were real close with them. It was the JaiaBot. And we towed the trailer up there. We parked it in one of their front lawns, and we built up their first prototype. We tested it. We built up their second prototype, and we tested it all from the comforts of our tiny little home.
You mentioned the JaiaBot. Let me just kind of grab this.
Yeah,
I'm going to grab this.
it.
I'm going to grab this. Can I grab it from behind like this? It's pretty durable, isn't it? We could use.
We're gonna have to edit that part out.
The terminology. Yeah. Look. Be careful what we do here.
There we go. We should do a 3D video. There you go.
This here is showing in two screens. Let me see if I can just get it in one. This year is called what, Ray? Tell me about this.
That is a JaiaBot. We designed it with a company out of Rhode Island called Jaia Robotics. They're a startup. I think they're kind of moving beyond startup now. They actually have fielded units. But basically it's a micro autonomous underwater vehicle. And what that means is typically with underwater vehicles that are used, they take a giant ship to launch them or an entire crew. They cost millions of dollars. And you have one piece of equipment. That's full size. That's not like a scaled down model. That's how big they are. So one or two people can load these up either off the shore, or they can take them out in a small boat and deploy them by hand, single hand. In the water, they'll turn on, they'll run and do a predetermined autonomous operation. A lot of times you'll have a fleet of them go out and they'll line up and they'll do a sounding dive to the bottom. So they'll like dive down backwards, and then they'll shut the motor off at a certain depth, or they'll wait till they get to the bottom. They'll shut the motor off. And as they float back up to the surface at a controlled rate, it'll take sensor readings from these little ports that are on the bottom at different depths. So you can basically get this three-dimensional point cloud of data of any area of water, which is really important because the way water flows, it's not just you have water coming out of a river or something like that. It's out into the ocean. It's not just like goes in and dissipates. It flows, and it flows three-dimensionally. So it might be chemicals might be sinking down to the bottom and flowing underwater. And so trying to do like water quality or figure out where contaminants are coming from or where they're going is really difficult, because if you have a single vessel, it's going to slowly just kind of mow the lawn. It's going to zigzag back and forth and take data points. And it might be hours before it gets from where it started to taking 20 meters below where it started. Whereas this, if you have a row of 12 of these, they can just do like a football field real quick and just up and down 12 at a time. So you're able to take data points much quicker, because instead of having one very expensive vehicle, you have a ton of cheaper, smaller vehicles that can get samples quickly. Now, obviously, there's limitations to it because it's not huge, so you can't put huge, heavy-duty sensors on it, but it's pretty good.
Okay, so talk me through the process. I know nothing about how you would begin where you would start from, and how you would come up with a product like this. So how does that work?
So this client kind of had an idea in their head of what they wanted, and we met and kept working together. But the main thing is we knew that it needed to be able to run on the surface and it needed to dive down deep. So that kind of constrained the design a little bit. We put the wings on it because we need a planing surface so it can run on the top of the water quickly. But it also has to have a pressure vessel built in so it can dive down to the bottom and not crush. And from there, we just kind of backed out the design requirements. And then we went from the requirements to conceptual design, from conceptual designs to actual designing of the parts. There's a lot of neat things in there that are really unique to the JaiaBot. It has a twist lock assembly, so the motor half and the half that contains all the electronics and sensors, a lot of times on vessels they're bolted together so that they can be sealed properly. And you would have to like unbolt them or remove components or something like that to charge batteries or change out components inside if you needed to work on them. Whereas the JaiaBot, you can simply just untwist it, and when you untwist it, it shuts it off and separate it. Yep. So it just comes out, and there you go. So that's how you would get it accessing anything you either need to service, or maybe you have some memory in there that you need to access, or something that you don't want to do over Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. So that's kind of very novel approach.
I'm gonna just set this
Yeah,
down
you should
here.
probably set it down. You probably
break
broke
it.
for all that.
I don't want to break it.
I think that one's already broken. That's why we have it. So don't feel bad.
That's why you let me play with it. What is your favorite part about? What do you enjoy most about going through the process of problem solving and designing something like that? What's your favorite part?
The conceptual design phase.
And talk to me about.
So that's when
why?
we're drawing pictures of what we think it's going to look like. We're solving the main problems. We're just not getting down into the details. And that's the part I really like, because you have to do that, you have to have enough experience at doing the details to know what you can do and what you can't do. But you still have freedom to be like, well, we know there's going to be a problem doing this, but we can figure that out later. So it's like the more fun part of design, right? You're making pretty pictures, you're coming up, you're able to be super creative, and then you have to maybe rein in some of those ideas later on. But definitely the conceptual part is just, it's fast, and the thing is new at that point. So for me, a project being new is exciting, and going quickly on something is exciting. And then cleaning up the details later is the hard part.
Do you have any tricks to building inspiration? Do you have any things that you do that kind of help you kind of establish that?
The big thing we do that's different is we don't start with a brainstorming session with our team. We will all go learn about the product, do our own research, and then do our first conceptual designs on our own. And the reason for that is because I don't want to pollute anyone else's mind with my idea. So a lot of times you go and brainstorm and you're like, oh, you throw out an idea and it gives somebody else an idea. And we'll get to that phase, but on the early phase, I don't want to do that, because then what I do is end up with, if I have 3 engineers working on it and myself, I end up with 4 ideas that are interpretations of what I said, because everyone hears what the boss was talking about, and then that, even if it's subconscious, it influences their ideas. So we have like very strict, like, come up with some ideas and then meet with them. We don't go and just jump in and just start brainstorming together. We'll come up with ideas separately and then come together at a later date, work through those ideas, and then pick what we want to do. Or maybe those ideas then the brainstorming session might work, and they influence other ideas.
Do you think that sets you apart from other design companies?
I have no idea.
Product development companies?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how everyone operates. In the engineering world where I was at, it was always very big on collaborative everything. Everything's collaborative. And collaborative's good, except that people do need to have their own views. And a lot of times when you go straight into collaborative, especially in the engineering world where you have people who are socially awkward, like you'd mentioned, they're afraid to give their idea in a collaborative environment because someone might tell them it's stupid. And a lot of great ideas came from those stupid ideas. But if you let them work those ideas out and they know that they have to present something and they have to have it ready to present before they walk into this brainstorming session, They can't just hear what other people said and be like, oh crap, I'm not gonna say this. They've already got it. They got to do it. And then that's where you'll get really out of the box ideas. So when we do conceptual designs, it's typically we present 3 designs to the customer. One of those is very heavily related to what the customer told us originally. One of them is typically what we think is the best approach. And then one of them is typically an out of the box idea to share with the customer to see if it sparks something else in them, or if they're like, this changes the way I want to go, or it just adds more discussion, and then we can maybe do another round or something like that.
Would you consider yourself a creative?
Yeah. I'm definitely I'm a very creative person. I'm not super detail oriented.
So you surround yourself by producers as a creative person.
I mean, we have both on the team. So I have another person who's very much creative driven, and their method of doing things is like form over function. And then I have another engineer who's very good at technical side of things, making sure something's going to work, looking at how he's actually going to build it. And then we have, another person who's basically very experienced, and they're solely there just to be like my backup for checking work, right?
Wait, did you just say form over function?
Yeah.
Shouldn't it be the other way around?
No.
Shouldn't functionality rule over form?
No. Because you can control functionality with requirements, right? So we can say something needs to work this good, and we can design it to work that good. But on the form side of things, that's always subjective, right? Subjective or objective?
Yeah,
whatever the right word is for that. Like,
or objective.
You know what I mean? Like, people have opinions on the form side of things.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to like, when you're designing for function, it's very easy to stop and be like, I'm done. This does what it's supposed to do. But on the form side of things, it's very difficult to say it's done, right? Like, when do you put the pen down and say, it looks the way I want it to look, or it feels the way I want it to feel, or it sounds the way I want it to sound? So like that form for us, it goes beyond just the way something looks. Like when we're doing Swift Pause, like we made sure that like these snaps on it make a good audible snap. And that was part of the design process of it. Was not just, okay, the snap needs to hold it shut, but we wanted it to make a nice audible click that did a couple things. One, it alerted the user that it was closed. And 2, the tone of the snap needed to be correct, so it gave a feeling of quality. Like, it's like closing a car door. Sometimes you have a car that sounds real tinny when you close it. Another one is very solid. You want something to sound solid when it snaps like that, so it doesn't sound rattly, and that gives the impression to the user that it's high quality, even though it might cost exactly the same to make that as it did the one that sounds all rattly when you close it. And it was really just the shape of the snap fit that we put on it was the only difference.
You actually have enlightened me to something. I always used to be a fan of form over fashion, but I love the fact that you kind of clarified like the terminology of establishing, okay, the form has to achieve this objective, but fashion can rule over form once you establish that standard. I've always been the opposite way. I'm like, no, fashion can't rule. You mean
function or fashion?
Oh, sorry, function.
I was confused there for a second.
Fashion over form.
Form over function.
Form over function.
Form would be fashion. Yeah.
Function. Did I just screw up that whole thing?
No, you're right. Yeah. So function would be what it does, and like the form would be how it does it more so. Like, obviously everyone associates form with like the way something looks, but for us, it's kind of also just how things operate rather than just what they end up doing at the end of the day.
Yeah. I know a little bit about your history. You worked in an engineering company for a while, right?
Yeah, I've worked at a couple. So,
would they be considered corporate companies? Can you give us like a summary of your work?
Yeah, I mean, my longest tenure was at L3 Harris, which at the time was just Harris, and that was like almost 10 years. So that was corporation.
So why go out on your own when you have like a steady paycheck and a stable kind of 9 to 5 and work that's coming in?
So it took a long time for me to like gain up enough, like, I was afraid to leave for a while. But I ultimately knew I wanted to do it. But a lot of it came down to I didn't like who I was in a corporate world. Because you have so little, like, responsibility, even though they might give you responsibility. 9 times out of 10, when you have a lot of responsibility, it's actually the people below you who are responsible for what you're responsible for. So that's kind of out of your control. So that annoys me. And then also, like, I didn't like, that to me, I found the work easy. I know they do amazing things there, but I was never really challenged. Everything I did was like, it was cool work, but it wasn't, I could always figure it out. So I found that, like, the work I was a little bored because of that. And then 2, if I did a really good job, people would come up to me and go, "Ray, you did a great job on that." And then if I had if I had something where things just didn't go my way, people would still come up and go, "Ray, you did a great job on that." And I'm glad that people were friendly, but at the end of the day, like, you just kind of just get by after a while. If you're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter if I work my butt off or if I relax, I'm just going to get by. So that was probably just like a me thing. Like, my personality didn't work with that, and that's what I found. Maybe that, I'm sure that's not everyone's story, but that's my story with it. And I find when I'm working on my own or with my own company, I work a lot harder because my name is on it, and I am very big on what people think of me, which is probably not a great thing, but as a company owner, you have to do that. So, like, we've had customers where we had problems with their product that were completely out of our hands. Like, it was another contractor that was failing, and that customer became unhappy, and we've spent more money making that customer happy than they ever paid us. So we, like, lost tons of money. And as a small business, that's really hard to do. But I just have to run my business that way because I just care so much about one, they were good people. I didn't want to let them down. But also, like, it's important that, like, people see your company as, like, a reputable company, stuff like that. And I'm not willing to let anything impinge on that. Whereas when I was working for a corporation, if things didn't go that great and it was out of my control, my answer was, well, it's out of my control. And now it's like, even if it's out of my control, it's still my responsibility. And I just won't sleep at night till I figure it out.
Your experience with the corporate world and my experience are very similar. I just think there's some disassociation between the product and your responsibility to it, for the most part. And your experience with the private business world and mine are very similar, because it's easily been the toughest thing I've ever done in my life. But very rewarding.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So, I mean, I just think that's interesting, I'm just, let me move on to something else. But
were you getting choked up? You were
I was going to cry.
Yeah,
I was going to cry. No, but Ray. No, I mean, I want to expound on business, but on private business, I don't want to attack everyone that works. I am not a fan of the corporation, and I hear you talk about the managerial.
But I mean, there's a lot of my friends that still work there. They do really well at it. They do much better at it than I ever would.
Financially better?
Well, not just financially, just like they climb the ladder better than I would. And it's not that corporations are bad. It's they're just not for me.
I would disagree.
I'm essentially
I think corporations have lost their way, personally. On a large scale.
It depends on the corporation. Either way, I definitely it didn't work for me. And
you might have some contractors that might not want to work with you anymore after this conversation.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm joking. We can cut this out.
We can edit that part out, right?
I hate corporations. Okay, well. Anyway, I agree. I have a friend. He's done very well. He works at a corporation, and he has climbed the ladder. He's done very well. A lot of the stuff you talk about, though, and I do think it's a different personality type.
It's a personality thing. Like, so many people are great at it. It just didn't work for me, and so I became a person I wasn't happy with. Is ultimately what it was. It has nothing to do with my employer. It has to do with me just not being the right fit in that. And unfortunately, because of one, the time I started there was like during the recession, like 2008, 9, whatever, right? So like I was afraid to leave for a long time because a lot of people that started working in their professional career at that time were stuck with this like, well, I got to stay here because I'll never be able to find another job, or if I leave, I can't come back. Whereas now, at least for the last few years, a lot of people who have come out of college have, or there's so many jobs. They're just like, they just bounce around because they're like, oh, well, if this doesn't work out, then I'll just go somewhere else and they'll pay me more money.
Which I think is a mistake. I bounced around.
If we get down to further on your questions, I can go into some of that.
I bounced around for a while when I was young, and I used to think it was because I was good. And what I found out later was because I was cheap. Well, let's talk about we're down into the further part, integrating, talking about managing chaotic way of life, how to integrate with your business. What question were you speaking of indirectly?
I think you were talking about, let me see here. It was, what do you value in people you work with?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's, you do have some of your team who I love.
Yeah.
Suzanne, I love her. She's awesome. And other ones, Christina.
It's just Christine. You got to get her name right.
Let me say that again. And take two. Suzanne, who I love. Christine, who I love. And who's the... I can't...
Oh, my God. Really?
He's like my favorite, and I can't remember him.
Kenan.
I got a crush on him, too.
Everyone has a crush on Kenan.
Kenan is a beautiful man.
Okay. But, yeah, so... like what I value most is like
wait,
loyal.
How uncomfortable did I just make you?
I'm never uncomfortable. Not around you.
I don't believe that at all.
I'm uncomfortable for people who are around us.
So since I'm going to cut this whole section out and move on to the question, no, maybe I'm not. Maybe we'll just let it roll. Let people know what type of a person I really am. What do you value? You got a great team around you.
So
what do you value?
Like loyalty and dedication, I guess.
How do you keep your team?
Let's put this. I'm such a loyal person. I worked at a company that I did not really care that much for 10 years. I was so loyal. It's important because when we hire somebody, like we're understaffed often, but we're not like, I'm not going to hire somebody if I know I can't keep them, right? Like, so when we hire somebody, it's a commitment that we're making to them, that we're like, hey, you're here, you're part of the team, you're part of the family. Like we've got your back, and I kind of expect that same loyalty in return. So knowing that, like, if we, like, our employees, when they start working with us, they're not just like, oh, well, I'll try this. It sounds fun. I'll try it out. If it doesn't work out, I'll go somewhere else, or maybe I'll go here and I'll try and learn as much as I can and then take that somewhere else. Like, I know it's maybe tough to join on to a small business and be like, I want to be a part of this. I want to help it grow. I want to stay there with it. But that's what we need. It's really hard for a small business to replace people because the people they have become so ingrained in what the company actually is. So to me, like, you're never going to make it past resume screening, or at least the first phone interview, if you're not at least smart, right? So intelligence is not really a problem. As long as you're smart enough to make it through that, you're smart enough to learn whatever we need to teach you. And then, but the main thing after that is pretty much come here to be here. Don't come here to go somewhere else.
What would you say? I like what you're saying. And I think it's a good message.
Because I grew up watching mafia movies. It's like, you got to be...
No, but I think it's a good message. There's a lot... Well, to your point, okay, there's a lot of opportunities for young kids coming out that are trained. So they just kind of bop around. And chances are that they don't want to, like, they don't look at a small business and go, oh, this is going to help me grow my corporate resume and grow and climb the corporate ladder. It's a little bit more of a risk jumping on board with a small business and believing in a small business. And a small business is chaotic. It's not organized. And you have to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, so that's actually a good point, though, that I'd like to talk to the corporations who are listening to this. If they don't think that seeing a small business on a resume, and I used to be probably guilty of this when I was looking at resumes when I was working at Harris. Like, if you don't look at small business on a resume and see it as like incredibly good experience, you're wrong. Because like, we ask our team to be so much more responsible than they ever would have to be in the same amount of time at other companies. Plus, our projects move so much faster. They're getting multiple years of experience every single year, right? And I've had other people who've worked with our team that have worked at corporations, and they'll echo the same thing. And they're like, these people are just, I mean, at their age, they're way above where they would be. And it's because, you know, they have a hard job. Like, they have to figure out a lot of stuff. And, you know, I can't hold their hand on everything. So it forces them to get a lot of experience really quick. And so that's where I think working in a small business gives you a leg up. And also, like, I would never, if we had employees that, you know, had other dreams, I would never want to like step on those. That we would always be supportive and be like, well, let's figure out how to do that. But also, I don't want you coming in with another dream and we're just a stepping stone along the way.
Yeah, you got to commit. You got to be part of this.
Yeah, so
be part of the team. What do you feel about this this statement or this quote? It's not who you hire, it's who you fire.
I try not to fire people. I just try not to hire people that I ever intend on firing.
How can you do that?
I mean, we're a small business. I mean, we have like 7 employees. So if I started firing people, we'd be in deep trouble because we wouldn't have enough people to do our jobs. But also, like, we wouldn't have hired those people if we weren't with them. I mean, we've had like some contractors that just didn't work out. But anyone who actually made it to the level of employee, like, we went through them pretty good.
Like your Gary V's of the world, though, they like to use these slogans. Gary Vaynerchuk. He's like a famous YouTube influencer.
Okay.
And he built like a multi-million-dollar wine business from his parents, his dad's wine shop.
Sounds like a terrible life, yeah.
But the point is he's one of those cliche influencers, and one of his big statements, you know, or someone like him is like, it's not who you hire, it's who you fire.
So I think those people are also, they build up the thought of working for them. You get people to want to work for them because they think it's something amazing. And then at the end of the day, they end up underbidding on the person when they hire them. So the person works for less money than they're worth. And then at the very moment that they do something that didn't work out, they fire them. But they just go through people super fast. For us, at least our business model, like, we're not trying to grow fast or anything. When we hire somebody, it's a big investment. Like, it costs a lot of money. They're typically going to work for us for quite a while before we actually start making money off of them. When I say quite a while, I mean, it can be like a year from the time that we hire somebody until I'm not redoing their work. And some of that's because I don't want to hire super experienced people because they have a lot of benefits, but they also come with a lot of like demons, you know, that they might have
baggage.
Or they might have like really bad habits.
Yeah.
And especially like the method in which we do it faster is not that we're doing anything less professional. What we're doing is we're able to focus on the problems that need to be focused on, and then using sound engineering judgment for those other problems. But it takes a while to learn how to identify those. And so that's why it can take a while for us to get someone up to the point where they're going down the right path all the time. And when I'm redoing work, we're not billing a customer for it, you know, so it
sounds to me like you believe in a more holistic view. Like you're committed to who you hire. You're committed to
100%.
Seeing it through.
100%.
And you see that as a more valuable return and a more valuable choice than going, I'm just going to turn and burn.
Yeah, if I hire somebody and they screw up, I'm not just be like, well, it's not going to work out. See ya. Right? We're going to figure out why, because there's a reason we hired you. Let's figure out how to make sure that investment was sound. Like, I don't know. Firing people's, like, obviously certain people need to be fired, but in my opinion, it probably took some oversight to get to the point where you even hired them in the first place. Like, or you definitely had some sort of lapse.
Well, I actually agree, and I like your perspective. I am a sucker sometimes for cliche statements, so I'm glad that you kind of brought some clarity. Just wrapping this up, let me just look here. kind of some ethereal questions, one or two here. What do you wish there was more of in the world, Ray?
What do I wish there was more? Reasonable people. So a lot of people don't use reason in their daily life. And I run into this with the boat a lot. But it's like we have tons and tons of rules. And people sometimes don't use reason with those. They just enforce the rules like, you can't park here. Why? Because it says you can't park there. And it's like, well, is me parking there for 5 minutes really going to hurt anything? Now, obviously, if I left my car there for a week and someone couldn't get into their house or something like that, I would understand. But it seems like it's very common in the world for people to be unreasonable and, like, rather than help out fellow man, they just follow whatever they like. I guess a good example is things like homeowners associations where they have rules that they want you to follow, and it really doesn't make any freaking difference if to anyone other than the person who wants you to follow that rule. So
it seems like there's a lot fewer reasonable people in the world and rational people in the world.
Rational, maybe that's a better word for it.
But there's a lot fewer.
Yeah.
Why?
Bottom line, I don't know, because people feel that they need to assert themselves. So
you feel like it's technology.
Technology causes other problems. I think a lot of that is the small groups who can speak the loudest with technology tend to get the most interest. So we get a lot of pandering to them, where maybe the masses don't agree with something, but we can't watch our favorite show anymore because they got canceled because 4 people online yelled about it.
Dude, we need another hour to open up on that.
Yeah.
I have deep sentiments for that, but I'm trying to be professional. God damn these groups. The last question I'm going to ask you, Ray, or I can ask you more, but we'll wrap this up. If you could you're a problem solver.
Yep.
So this makes sense because you're a problem solver. So if you could solve one problem in the world, what would it be and why?
We're going to need to edit this one out.
No. Just tell me what it is. Let's hear it. We can take it. We can handle the truth on this show.
I will tell you the problem, and then I will tell you the root cause. So we have too many people.
On the planet?
Yep.
There's too many people
on
the
planet?
planet?
People on the planet.
All right.
Which, obviously, we don't have a good solution for that people would get behind. So we're going to have to edit that section out. But at the end of the day, the real problem is resources. If I could solve any problem in the world, it would be making sure there's enough resources for everyone on Earth. Because we're slowly running out of those resources. And with, like global warming, stuff like that, it's going to eat into those resources even more. And I don't see a good end in sight, and adding just headcount going up just means we need more stuff, and we're going to eventually run out of stuff.
Efficiency of our use of resources is, I think, a bigger issue.
Yeah, I mean, we do, like, we splurge as humans now. It's funny because, like,
don't you feel like as we move closer to an apocalyptic period, people are like give less fucks? Excuse my French. They give less fucks about stuff. Like they're like,
we're already fucked anyways.
We're already fucked. Who cares? Let's get the biggest truck we can drive or or whatever.
I mean, if you go down that road, you'd be like, I'm just going to use up all the fuel quicker, so it forces us to do something about it. I'm actually helping.
Don't you feel like it's like the slippery slope of human...
Necessity is the mother of invention. If I make it necessary that we switch from fossil fuels by using up all the gas we have now, then I'm helping.
I mean, I do feel like... I feel like the inefficiency is a big deal, but then at the same time, the more efficient we become, like we are with, a really simple example of efficiency, putting automated checkout in your grocery store. Or AI.
Well, that goes back to the population. Then we have too many people to be store clerks, and not enough store clerk jobs, so the resources are out.
We're screwed.
Yeah, we're screwed.
All right, we'll end it on that note, Ray.
Yeah, we're screwed.
And here's the Ray Catania with Catania Product Development.
Yep.
And got it right that time. This is our first podcast here with what's the name of our podcast, Jesse?
To be determined.
This is the first of
that's a
our
good one.
TBD business podcast. I like that. TBD business podcast. This is the first one of the TBD business podcast with Ray Catania, Catania Product Development. Ray, thanks a lot for doing this.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
And there we go. We're done. That's the end. Have a good day. See you guys later.